As we continue in the book of Job, we're in chapter 10 today. Job is speaking back to his friend Bildad, who has accused him of being a person who is getting exactly what he deserves. And Job is not buying it. Matter of fact, he kind of digs in. He's digging a hole for himself here that he's going to have a hard time getting out of. As he digs in, he is now exposing to us his struggles with God. Not his theology, as we've seen, pretty much on page on his theology. He understands who God is, but he doesn't like who God is. He doesn't like how God is treating him specifically. And he's being very vocal about that. In chapter 10, he goes deeper into this concern, and we find in verse 1 that he is complaining and he's bitter. It says, "My soul is loathed by my life. I abandon all restraint in myself. To my complaint, I will speak in the bitterness of my soul." Now, this is the first time, of at least two other times, where he claims he is bitter. And bitterness is never a good thing, never a good trait. It's usually a result of anger and musing over difficult events for a long time that causes us to become bitter. And he admits he's become bitter. And then he begins to challenge God. In verse 2, "I will speak to God. Do not account me as the wicked. Let me know why you contend with me." So he wants to contend with God, and he wants God to answer him. He wants God to speak up and tell him why it is that he's suffering the way he's suffering. God needs to answer Job. Now, we can see here, this is not a good road to go down. He is becoming more rebellious, more stiff-necked, and challenging God in ways that he should never do. In verse 7, he says, "According to your knowledge, I am indeed not wicked, yet there is no deliverer from your hand. You know, Lord, that I have not done anything wrong. I do not deserve this suffering. You know that, God, but you're not sending anybody to rescue me. Why not?" is basically his concern and his argument. So why is God allowing all this stuff to even happen? Matter of fact, he wants to know why he was ever even born. In verse 18, "Why then have you brought me out of the womb? Would that I had breathed my last and no eye had seen me. I should have been as though I had not been, carried from womb to womb." He had already mentioned this earlier in chapter 3. He wished he had never been born. If he had never been born, he would be at rest. He would be at peace. He wouldn't be dealing with these things. He doesn't want to be alive and wish he had never experienced life at all. He's pretty down, as you can tell. Very, very desperate and challenging God throughout the process. So he says, "God, why don't you just leave me alone?" Look at verse 20. He says this, "Would he not cease for a few of my days? Withdraw from me, that I may have a little cheer before I go, and I shall not return to the land of darkness and the shadow of death." So now he wishes he'd never been born, but he is born, obviously. And he knows God is not going to treat him fair, at least that's his view. But he asks God just to back off, give him a little bit of rest, let him have a little delight before he dies. And that's pretty much his challenge to God. So what he's doing here, as he's going through difficult times and suffering, just like most of us do, he is struggling to find a way to understand this and also understand who God is. And he's right now pulling the wrong direction. Now, suffering is part of life, and God has a plan for suffering in our lives. God uses it. He's going to use it ultimately in Job's life. That's one of the reasons we like this book so much. But he went through a lot of heartache and issues because he wasn't responding as he should. What would be a right response? Well, let me go to Psalm 46 with you for just a moment and look at these famous verses, verses 1 to 3. It says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake in its holy pride," lofty pride. He knows that God is his strength. He turns to God at the time where he's hurting the most. But in Psalm 42 also says this, "As a deer pants for the water brook, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" Here the psalmist is going through these hard troubles. And what does he do? Well, his soul pants for God. He is drawn closer to God in the midst of his suffering. and he's rewarded as a result. Job is going the opposite direction, a direction that often people take, and sometimes all of us might take. Instead of pulling near God in the time of suffering, we pull away from God. We challenge God. We get upset with God. And of course, that never ends very well. We're going to keep following the story. We have another friend by the name of Zophar who now enters in, and we're going to look at him and Job's response next week. I hope you can join us.